I caught my own mother cheating, and then she convinced my father that the crazy one was me. I used to think family was the one place you could be soft. Turns out, it's where I learned to grow armor. I was 18 when it happened, old enough to drive at night with the windows down and music too loud, but still young enough to believe my parents were unbreakable. My dad ran a small construction company, 3 crews, 2 battered trucks, and a coffee thermos that smelled like burnt courage. He measured love in early mornings and paid invoices. He wasn't a hugger. He was a provider, and I respected that. My mom, people called her perfect. Hair always right, voice smooth as a commercial, the kind of smile that made neighbors lower their guard. At business dinners, she stood next to my dad like a trophy that could talk. When I was a kid, she packed my lunches with notes and drew little hearts on napkins. As I got older, the hearts disappeared. So did the notes. So did the part of her that felt like Mom. The crack showed up on an ordinary Tuesday. Because it's never thunder and lightning, it's Tuesday. I got home early from practice because the coach cut us loose for a storm that never came. I let myself in, dropped my bag, and heard laughter coming from the kitchen. Not my dad's. A man's laugh I didn't recognize. Low, confident, familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. I don't know why I walked toward it. Curiosity is a cruel engine. I stopped in the hallway and looked through the doorway just enough to see what I can never unsee. My mother leaning against the counter, one hand on a man's chest like she already owned him, her smile, soft, private, one I'd never seen pointed at my father. He said something into her ear and she giggled like the kind of girl she told me never to date. The air went thin. Something metallic rang in my ears. My foot scraped the floor and the chair leg dragged an inch. She snapped her head around. In that half second our eyes met, and I watched her switch masks, flirtation to fury as quick as a blink. "What are you doing here?" She spit, not scared, angry. I didn't answer. Couldn't. The man didn't bother to look ashamed. He just smirked, like I'd walked into a room that belonged to him and not to the man who paid the mortgage. I backed away, heart clawing at my throat. She followed, fingers clamping my forearm, nails enough to leave little half-moons. "You didn't see anything," she whispered, all sugar-cut with glass. "If you say one word to your father, you and I are done. Do you understand me?" I didn't nod. I didn't shake my head. I just pulled my arm free and climbed the stairs one at a time, slow because if I moved fast, I was afraid I'd run until there were no stairs left on earth. I tried to tell my dad that night. He was at the kitchen table with invoices spread out and a pencil behind his ear, sleeves rolled up, the tendons in his hands like cords. I said, "Dad, I saw something." The words tasted like metal. He didn't even look scared. He looked disappointed before I finished. "Son, whatever you think you saw—" "I saw, Mom," I said, and my throat burned on the last word. "With someone else." He closed his eyes and exhaled through his nose like a man choosing patience over anger. "Your mother loves me," he said evenly. "We've been through more than you know. Don't bring me gossip like you're at a locker." Before I could answer, she was in the doorway like she'd been waiting on her mark. No makeup. Cardigan draped just right. Eyes wet the way actors do when they've got a 20-second close-up. "What did he say?" She asked, voice shaking. He told her. She gasped like a stage direction and put a hand to her throat. "Daniel, why? Why would you say something so evil about your own mother?" I felt it then. A tilt in the room, a current moving me to a place I didn't choose. She stepped toward my dad and touched his hand. "He's been different, moody. I've tried to talk to him. He spends too much time online. Maybe he needs boundaries." She looked at me with a face like pity. Or help. "Help?" I choked. "You're cheating on him." She flinched just once, fast, then handed him a tissue he didn't need. "I'm so tired," she whispered. "I do everything for this family, and he hates me for it." My dad stared at me like he was measuring a board he already planned to cut. He said, Apologize to your mother. Not prove it, not tell me more. Apologize. I didn't. I couldn't. The silence made its own decision. That night I lay in bed and watched the ceiling fan carve slow circles, and I made a promise to myself. Bring proof, not pain. If I went to my dad with rage, I'd be the problem. If I brought evidence, I'd be a son. Evidence hides in plain sight. You just have to notice where a liar relaxes. My mom's phone lived face down, always, but liars get sloppy when they feel safe. In the morning, she set it on the counter while she reached for cinnamon. The screen lit from a text preview. Thursday, 6:30, side door. C Prime. The contact wasn't a name. It was a business, Carmichael Property Group. I took a picture of the notification with my phone and set hers back exactly where it had been. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped mine in the sink. I started paying attention to the business, my dad's business, because that's where men like C burrow. My dad had already let Mom help with the books. She called it streamlining. Vendors started emailing accounts. Riverstonebuilds.com, Atten, Maria. The bookkeeper, Mrs. Lee, left with a smile so tight it creaked. Mom said she'd found something more aligned with her season. At dinner, she used words like integrate and consolidate and restructure, while my dad rubbed his temples and said, "If it keeps me off ladders, fine." I visited the office under the lie of grabbing my calculator. In the filing cabinet, new folders wore her handwriting. Vendor rationalization, LLC updates, trusts, a thin one labeled Carmichael. Inside, a registered agent form, a new business account application, and a draft service agreement between my father's company and Carmichael Property Group, consultancy for efficiency. The signature line for my dad's name was blank on the draft. That didn't mean it was blank on the version that mattered. I took photos. I put everything back. I started a folder on my phone called Homework and filled it with screenshots. A bank welcome letter to an email I knew wasn't my father's. A vendor message asking to confirm the new ACH. A security camera still from the office hallway showing Mom at 7:12 p.m. with a man whose jawline matched the one in my kitchen. When you gather enough small truths, a story shows up whether anyone invited it or not. I brought it to my dad 2 weeks later. I didn't go to the kitchen table. I went to the garage because the garage is his church. I spread out printouts on the hood of his truck. "Look," I said, "just look." He looked. He looked the way a man looks at a blueprint he doesn't want to understand because if he does, he has to tear down a wall he spent a decade building. "Emails can be faked," he said. "Paperwork can be misunderstood." He chose softer words like pillows around a nail. "She's moving money," I said, "and she's not moving it for us." He lifted a page and squinted like maybe the ink would change if he wanted it enough. Then he called her. She came to the garage with a dish towel over her shoulder and the patience of a saint in a painting. He asked questions that were all invitations to lie. She accepted with grace. "Vendor consolidation," she said. "Bank transitions. Tax strategy. Your son is anxious. I'll fix the password so he can't scare himself." He nodded like a man who holds his breath underwater because he's already too deep to swim back without drowning. That was the night she made the move. I heard them whispering in the office after midnight. I lay in bed and listened to their voices get sharp and then flat and then quiet, the way blades sound before they cut. In the morning, my dad stood at the doorway to my room with his keys in his hand. He didn't come in. He said, "You need to give your mother space. You'll stay with Aunt Rosie for a while." I said, "You're choosing her over me." He said, "I'm choosing my wife." Aunt Rosie had a pull-out couch and a soft heart, and the kind of advice that starts with honey. I stayed 3 nights. On the 4th, I went to a friend's. The 5th, I went to the warehouse and got a part-time job unloading boxes because moving something heavy felt better than holding something I couldn't set down. I learned which gas stations stayed open after midnight and which bus drivers didn't check passes. I learned how quickly a house stops being yours when your name isn't on a deed. But I didn't stop watching. Mr. Alvarez, my dad's foreman, called me from a number I didn't recognize. He whispered like we were in church. Vendors aren't getting paid, he said. Your dad says it's a bank error. Payroll bounced at Southside. Your mom fired the office assistant who asked questions. I went to the bank and asked to speak with the branch manager. I told her I suspected financial abuse. Not elder, just abuse. She couldn't tell me anything, but she handed me a form with a serious title and said, "If you submit this to the Financial Crimes Unit, they can request records. We can hold unusual transfers for review if we get notice." She didn't say she was rooting for me. She didn't have to. I also found a lawyer who would charge me less than a truck. Ms. Patel wore sneakers with her suit and listened without blinking. "You don't have standing to sue," she said. "But we can make noise. Banks hate noise." She drafted letters to the bank and to the registered agent for Carmichael demanding preservation of records and warning of unauthorized transfers. We sent them certified. Paper is slow, but it leaves footprints. The next week, something shifted. A $38,000 transfer froze pending verification. The new ACH bounced back with an error code. A vendor called my dad directly to ask why checks were now printed from Carmichael Property Group. My dad called my mom. Mr. Alvarez told me he heard his voice break on the second ring. 2 days later, my phone lit up with my dad's name. I stared at it until it went dark, then called back. He said, "Come to the house." "No, please, no, son, just a location." He was at the kitchen table with a stack of papers and a face I hadn't seen since my grandfather's funeral. She was standing with her arms folded so tight her knuckles went white. The room smelled like lemons and a lie. He pushed a printed bank confirmation across the table. "Explain," he said. His voice was quiet. I learned more fear from quiet voices than from shouting ones. She didn't blink. "I moved money to a consultancy to reduce vendor costs. You told me to streamline." "This is my signature," he said, laying a form next to it. "Only it isn't." Her laugh was short and sharp. "Are you accusing me of fraud, Daniel? After everything I've done for this family?" He didn't look at me. He looked at the countertop, at the sunlight on the tile, at anything that wasn't her mouth. "Who is Carmichael?" he asked. "Business," she said. "Something you obviously don't understand anymore." "And the man in my kitchen?" he asked, so soft I almost didn't hear it. She straightened. "Some people get small when they're cornered." She grew. "Grow up," she said. "People change. Your son is the problem. He's been in my way since he was 12. That was the first true sentence she'd spoken in months. He stood. The chair legs scraped the floor. "Leave," he said. She laughed like a bad song. "You don't mean that." "I am done being a man who refuses the truth because it's inconvenient," he said. "Leave my house." She misjudged the moment and smirked at me on the way out, a tiny curl of the lip like a stamp. The door closed with a sound I felt in my ribs. My dad sat back down. He put his hands flat on the table and stared at them like he didn't recognize them. Then he said, "I am sorry." Not performative. Not the way people say sorry because it's the end of a sentence. He said it like a person admitting gravity. We spent the next month fighting a war you can't post on Instagram. Ms. Patel filed for an injunction to stop asset transfers. The bank, terrified of headlines, assigned a real human with a real phone number. We found 3 more accounts opened in the company's name with addresses that weren't our office. We changed passwords, moved payroll to a clean account, called vendors, and promised cash on delivery. Mr. Alvarez slept at the Southside site to keep a repossession guy from taking the compressor. I ate cold pizza on a desk at 2 a.m. and learned to love the sound of a dot matrix printer because it meant a check printed that wasn't a lie. Carmichael's guy, C, turned out to be smarter than he looked, but not as smart as he thought. He had a habit of keeping copies. The police pulled him over for expired tags and found a folder in his passenger seat labeled CPG-flows. Inside was a hand-drawn diagram of money that started with my father's company, ran through 2 shells, and landed in an account with his name spelled right. The detective called my dad and asked if he knew a Maria River. He said, "Too well. She..." The DA pressed charges. It wasn't a movie. There were no fireworks. Just court dates and filings and her lawyer's letters dripping with words like misunderstanding and marital property. She showed up to arraignment in white, which made the clerk roll her eyes so hard I heard it. "Not guilty," she said, like a queen bored with peasants. In the end, we didn't get everything back. That's not how this works. We clawed enough to keep the doors open. We sold the Westfield truck and sublet the storage unit and shut down Northside because you can't pay men with hope. We kept the sign. That mattered. 3 months after the injunction, my dad came to the shop late with a pizza and 2 drinks and looked at me like a man asking permission in his own building. "I can rebuild a business," he said. "I don't know how to rebuild the time I threw you out." "You start by not doing it again," I said. He laughed once through his nose like something unclenched. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small ring of keys. Not to a truck, to the office. "Partner?" he asked. I said, "Pay is terrible." He said, "Benefits are decent." We made a sign to hang by the counter. We make mistakes. We fix them. People laughed. Then they came back. Mr. Alvarez taught a new kid how to listen to an engine. Tilt your head and wait for the sound under the sound. Some Saturdays we dragged a grill into the parking lot and burned hot dogs and called it community outreach. The paper sent a reporter who asked what changed. My dad said, "I started listening to my son." She wrote it down like it was more interesting than it felt. One afternoon, months later, a woman I used to call Mom asked for a meeting through her lawyer. Ms. Patel said I didn't have to go. I went anyway. The room smelled like disinfectant and dust. She tried on remorse like a dress, held it up, checked the mirror, put it back. "I'm sorry," she said, and named a list of reasons she wasn't. Stress, loneliness, feeling unappreciated. She blamed the man who taught her how to steal money and then took most of it. She blamed my father for trusting her. She even tried to blame me for telling the truth out loud. I listened because I wanted to know if there was a version of this story where I kept loving her. There wasn't. When she finished, my dad said, "I hope you become someone better. You don't get to be that someone here." We walked out into sunlight so ordinary it felt expensive. He unlocked the truck and tossed me the keys. "Drive," he said. We took the long way back, past the park where I used to run drills until the grass learned my name, past the warehouse where I unloaded boxes on nights I needed to touch something heavy, past the house that used to be ours. There was a new car in the driveway and a different color on the door. I thought it would hurt more to see it. It didn't. Some ghosts stop living where you leave them. At home, our home, not the house. We closed the bay doors and listened to the clatter settle. He leaned against the workbench and said, "You hungry?" I said, "Always." We ate burgers on the tailgate and didn't talk about forgiveness. It wasn't a switch. It was 1,000 small lights you turned back on one by one in a building you thought burned down. People ask me sometimes if I take any of it back. That's the wrong verb. You don't take back a tornado. You stand up after, count who's still with you, and rebuild with a better map. Here's mine. Trust with eyes open, love with receipts. And if someone ever asks you to ignore the math because it's just business, lock your doors and check your windows. Not because monsters wear masks, because most of them don't. I used to think family was where you could be soft. Maybe it still is, once you learn how to wear armor that opens from the inside. My dad and I, we kept each other. That's the only business I care about staying in. And her? Sometimes I see a woman in a white jacket in line at the grocery store and my heart trips and then keeps walking. She's a cautionary tale now, not a character in our house. If she ever wonders why the door doesn't open, that's a mystery she wrote herself. So here's my last truth. She stole money and time and a version of me that trusted too easily. But she didn't steal the ending. We did. We took it back. We wrote it with grease on our hands and receipts in a folder and a sign by the register that says what we believe. We make mistakes. We fix them. And we do not under any circumstances let a lie be the loudest voice in our home again.